With your consent, I'd like to marry Nagi.
Not as long, dear, as I've got a breath in my body.
All right. We'll fix that right away.
Welcome to another episode of the 31 Nights of Halloween Horror! You are not advertiser friendly. Episode number two, coming off of last night's insane, crazy, all kinds of just messed up wonderfulness that is De La Morte dell'Amore, otherwise known as the Cemetery Man. I know, crazy, insane, that's sort of redundant, but whatever. I thought, let's talk about another movie in the past, one that has a good cult following, and that just recently received a Steelbox release from Scream Factory, and that movie is John Carpenter's The Fog, yes, in all its Steelbox glory. So The Fog is about this small coastal town called Antonio Bay that is preparing to celebrate its 100th anniversary. However, a strange fog rolls into town, but this fog is no ordinary fog. No, it holds a secret, a dark secret, a deadly secret. And as this fog picks off its victims one by one, the frightened residents only have to fear what lies within the fog. Woo! Anyways, this movie is kind of hard to discuss because the more information you get about the actual plot, the more it's kind of spoiled. I know that from the beginning, you get this interesting little story about how there's this ship and something happens in the fog, and then you get a little bit more as you go on. And I think that is actually one of the strongest parts of this movie, so I'm not really going to tell you anything about that, because if you're going to watch this movie, I definitely want you to enjoy the lore and backstory that they're giving you throughout the plot of the movie, and to kind of discover it yourself and not have it ruined, because really, if you kind of know what's going on, then it kind of loses a little bit of its impact. So I thought, you know, I'm just going to give you like that rough little tease at the beginning and then get right into the scores, because that's really the important thing, right? So the scores: violence and gore, 1 out of 5. Yes, this movie does not do a lot in the blood and gore and violence. I mean, there are some deaths in there, but everything pretty much happens off camera, or if they're getting kind of hit, you know, you're not seeing blood or any, you know, ripping or tearing. So it's pretty tame in that aspect. You know, in a way, it's kind of a horror movie that you could show your kids, because there's not really a lot of, I would say, like high impact violence, but it is definitely got the scares, and you know, your kids better be a bit more mature than just, let's say, a 5-year-old or something like that. But anyways, violence and gore, 1 out of 5. Shock value, I'm giving it a 2 out of 5. Most of it is just basically jump scares. There's not a lot of jump scares, but the ones that they do are pretty effective, and they pull it off nicely. And you're going to get the whole misdirection thing on some of them. And I thought, you know, they did a pretty good job with that. So I'm giving it a 2 out of 5. Otherwise, nothing really shocking, like violence-wise or plot-wise. But it still has some good scares in it. So plot is 3 out of 5. The thing is, it's the plot itself is pretty basic. It's about basically a thing is happening. People don't know what's going on, then they try to figure out what's going on, and then when they figure out what's going on, they try to figure a way to get out of it. And so, I mean, it's pretty basic, but the thing I like about is the lore that they kind of give about this town. You have the beginning, this campfire tale by this old man, which kind of sets the basis, and then you get the old preacher's diary, and the fact that things kind of happen weird beforehand, and then all of a sudden, the fog rolls in, and you have got this storyline of just, your average day people just, you got these fishermen who are just trying to do their thing, and they get caught up in it. You have this woman who runs a radio station out of a lighthouse who's trying to do her thing, and it just kind of has this interesting flow when it comes to like the backdrop story and the regular story. The fact that in the beginning you get sort of the sense of what's happening, but you don't really know, and you kind of have this dueling narratives of like what the town actually thinks happened via what actually happened in the past. And I find that to be like a very compelling thing when watching this movie. So it's really neat type of storytelling, especially for a movie that is quite a slow burn. And when you're doing a slow burn, you have to have some things to keep the audience engaged, unless you really can pound out atmosphere. And this movie does really do a good job with atmosphere, at least during the night scenes with the fog. During the day, not so much, but the night scenes with the fog, plus the legendary score. I mean, what does John Carpenter know how to do voodoo magic with music? I mean, it's very simple, but yet so effective, and kind of like the plot. Simple, but so effective. So I'm giving it a solid 3 out of 5. I mean, if it wasn't for the mood and the sort of lore behind this movie, maybe it would have been a 2.5, maybe even a 2, because honestly, there's not too much there outside of the elements that I was talking about. But the pacing is pretty good, and the movie does move quite well, even if it is a slow burn. I mean, basically, you're kind of starting off eerie and creepy, and then toward the end, you get the action that's going on. So, acting, I'm also giving it a 3 out of 5. This movie has got legendary scream queen Janet Leigh in one of the roles, plus also has Adrienne Barbeau and Janet Leigh's daughter, Jamie Lee Curtis, the original, the John Carpenter connection with Halloween. So you've got some good talent there. The performances are pretty good for the most part. Nothing really ridiculously bad, but nothing spectacular. I did enjoy the performance of the guy who plays the father, even though there were some points where he kind of went, a little ham it up a little bit. But overall, I thought he did a pretty good job. So 3 out of 5. Nudity, 0 out of 5. There is no nudity. There is no bloody, gory nastiness. So like I said, this is an R-rated movie that you probably still can show your kids, if they're like, 12 or 13 or whatnot, because I don't see just some of the themes out there and the fact that, people are getting killed. But it's definitely not one of those things that you just would hide their eyes all throughout and would scar them for life. No, it'd freak them out and they might get scared of the fog or someone knocking at the door during the fog. But I think it's actually fine. And it's good for a horror movie for people who maybe not into the slash fest gory horror movies. So yeah, 0 out of 5 for Nudity. Enjoyment factor, I'm giving it a 3.5 out of 5. It's a slow burn, so I guess if you're big on action-packed violence and mayhem throughout, you're not going to find it in this movie. But instead, you're going to have a creepy, interesting, dark, atmospheric movie that has an interesting lore to it that at least for me, kind of like gets me in there and makes me kind of want to see what happens and see how this thing plays out. So I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. Definitely enjoy it. I can see why it's become a cult classic and had a god awful remake. And it's just it'd be so difficult to remake this movie because there's so much going on with it outside of actual horror moviness. With just having the right tone and backstory and things like that. I would just see like that a remake would just be almost impossible to pull off, even if they had like the greatest script ever. I mean, it would have to be a different movie at that time. But anyways, little sidetrack. So my overall impression is a 3 out of 5. It's a solid movie. Some people might find it slow. Some people who might not like slow burn might not enjoy it. But I think it's definitely a solid pick, especially if you want to do a horror movie and don't necessarily want to get splattered all over with blood and guts and something that, I mean, honestly, I don't even think it drops an F-bomb or anything. So, I mean, it's like one of those things that if you want to watch on Halloween and you're going to have maybe some, young teens around, whatnot, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I could see why they played this constantly when I was growing up, on television, because they really didn't have to edit much out of this anyways. But, so 3 out of 5 overall impression. That averages out to a 2.2 out of 5. So it's John Carpenter's The Fog. The Steelbook has some wonderful stuff. A whole bunch of special features, little featurettes, and of course some trailers. I always love watching the trailers on these videos, especially old movies. You get that one guy's voice. It's like John Carpenter brings you the next episode of horror. Things like that. I don't know. It just seems like trailers nowadays get a little bit weird. Or not weird. I mean, just, I don't know, maybe overly stylized, and then they give away most of the plot, and you don't really get this mysteriousness. But I don't know. Anyways, that was my review of The Fog. What did you think? Did you like it? Leave a comment. Did you watch The Fog? Do you agree with me, or do you think it was absolute trash? I don't know. Leave a comment in the comment section. And don't forget to check out last episode, Man della Morte dell'Amore. And I will see you tomorrow night for episode 3. Who knows what kind of craziness we'll have to talk about then. But until then, you stay scary, Internet.